So, what is Gen AI? So, Gen AI, it's a short term you'll hear for generative AI, and and this really is the new wave of things. It's as the point says, it's smart as a computer system. It today right now, generative AI systems have the IQ of Einstein, have the IQ of PhD. 2 years ago, it was we were lucky if we had a high school student. Generally, it was at the grade school level. So it's really in the last 2 years picked up, and there's a lot of reasons for it. But the areas that we can focus in on is creation of content, information, pictures, photos, music. But when we combine all of that together, the um, it really is the idea that it's generating new information based on what you're working with it. Another way to look at it is it learns by analyzing lots of data. So you may have heard of large language models or training AI. If we think about it, I have a 2.5-year old at home, and she's learning every day, and she's figuring out. She's now starting to speak. Um, and when we look at the how a child learns, this is how AI learns. We, the parents, we, the village of people, have to continuously provide input to the child so that they begin to start to assimilate this information and then can from there be able to practice what they're doing and be able to kind of test out ideas. And that's really what AI is. You'll hear terms of probabilistic modeling, meaning that if you write Mary had a little lamb, it will probably guess Mary had a little lamb, right? And that's really kind of how that comes together. And this is at its very simplest form, what generative AI is doing is it's that predictive component to how we tell stories, create pictures, do music, do data analytics, and so much more. Is if you think Mary had a little blank and it predicts lamb, then that's really what's going on with AI at its very basic and most simplest process. And so a lot of where we're at, we're going to touch upon kind of why we are today in this new age of generative AI, is this goes back into the 50s in the work that has been done. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Another term that you might hear is this concept of neural network. A neural network, the best analogy that I have is it is like a brain, okay? And it is how we are able to take information from when we were a child, when we were in university, throughout our lives, and pull that information together to begin to structure thoughts, structure ideas, learn, and be able to communicate with other people. Okay. And then finally, we're now entering a stage where generative AI can begin to do things on its own and or through human engagement. And so I want to just take this moment right now to look at this and say, okay, we've heard the phrases AI is coming for your job. No, it's not. Then we've heard the new phrase, someone who's using AI is coming for your job. This is where I think we're at. And I think we're probably a year away from agents or tools coming to be able to do the work. And so, our job, yours, mine, and everyone else entering into this new era, we need to understand how to work with this. We need to understand how to leverage generative AI and collaborate and work with it to help us be able to achieve that. And so, how does it work and how do we get there? Well, first of all, we need to assimilate and put in large amounts of data. This is what the big tech companies are doing. This is what, part of that $500 billion is for. This is when you hear OpenAI has spent, hundreds of millions of dollars to train these models. This is what it's doing. But small businesses can do the same thing as well. So the second thing that when we look at how does it work, it's pattern recognition. So if you repeat something long enough, it begins to do that. This is really the point of Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. So it's that pattern recognition. We're understanding what's happening and how that all comes together. Then finally, because we know it's trained enough now that it can begin to understand these patterns to be able to make informed decisions. So, for example, when an email comes in and it comes from person A, do this. So we can train it to do those kind of things. When a social media post says this, we can train it to do certain things. And again, as I mentioned, we're not going to get into the details. We're going to just really, what the heck is Gen AI? This is what we're talking about. Okay. So, quick history lesson. This, like I said, this starts back in the 40s. So the ability to pull this data is really what formed the beginning of the next step, which is the machine learning algorithms. And so in the early 80s and 90s, universities and large companies were using this as the ability to take information and then learn from that data in a methodology, but it still required massive computing powers and lots of people to be involved in the process. Then we had in the 2000s, we had a massive shift in technology. So computers got smaller, processes got faster, data was available, or memory was available. And so it provided a major growth in the ability to do something. The in the early 2000s, the way we look at it is this is the point at which if we're in the mechanized state, this is the point where the steam engine came in. It enabled us to do a lot more with a lot less. And this is one of the key turning points which got us to where we are today. Then in 2012, we started to develop this deep learning, and there were some major breakthroughs as a result of this increased computing power. And this is really kind of what sparked where we're all today. And then finally, the piece de resistance that put it all together was this transformational architecture. What do I mean by that? These now created the ability to take human language, please tell me this or create me an image of or summarize this document, human language, translate that into actions and tasks, and then use the LLMs, use the machine learning and the neural nets to be able to process all that and then return back again into a human readable form. And that's really where then things started to pick up. And then the world shifted. And so what happened in November of 22? OpenAI launches ChatGPT. And for those geeks among us, we saw it and we got kind of really excited. For the general masses, it was a fear, it was dystopian. That Christmas holiday and New Year's period was, kind of mumblings about this stuff, but if you weren't in the know, you didn't know. And for me, it was December 12th. And that's when I discovered ChatGPT. So that I had been using personally through all the years of marketing automation and all the stuff that I've been doing, this machine learning concept or these algorithmic approaches to doing things to build out process and models. But here we are. Now we've got a tool that can be able to do that. And that it over the course of the next 3 weeks for me personally, it shifted everything that we do. In mid-January, we as a company, I basically said, "Okay, Cortez, how'd you do it, buddy? Let's go and burn the bridges and burn the ships." And we're going down this path. And we've spent now the last 2 years focusing on this. So when we look at unlocking what's possible with Gen AI right now, we have the ability to develop tailored content. And so many industries have an entry point, if you will, that makes things become normalized. And so for generative AI, one of the first areas that most people are seeing this is in the marketing space. People are beginning to use generative AI to develop content, blog posts, all that kind of stuff. But if we think about Amazon and their predictive and recommended products, that is early stage generative AI. If we think about services like Alexa and I won't say it, but the other one, the Google one, we can use those tools. If we've used Siri and those type of tools, this is all early days. So it's able to learn, grow, and adapt. Um, and so that's really kind of what's possible there. Then we move into the area of automated tasks. So this is really now, like it says, but marketing, but we can also begin to start to create automations that, and again, in the marketing space, that receive an email, process it, or based on an event like this webinar, or the assessment that we're going to share with you at the end, it gives you the ability to introduce AI into a conversation. So one of the first adoptions that we did was in conversational voice AI. So I can now have a conversation with an automated agent over the phone and talk to it like a real human. And then finally, in the creativity side, but a lot of people see it as image, and the images throughout this presentation have all been done with generative AI. In fact, this entire presentation was created by AI. Now I'm live, I'm human, I'm right now I'm live, but later on we can take this exact same presentation and we can take the transcript of this and I can put it into an AI avatar and I can change a few words and a few ums and ahs and it will speak exactly like I am. It's quite frankly it's uncanny. But what when we look at this, what we begin to see is a freeing up of time. So we take at Lucid, we take a position that generation, Gen AI is about creating space so that you can do the more important work. It's about creating space so that you can collaborate with teams and do deeper thinking and do the hard work because we can let the tools do the processing work, the time consuming work. Then the other part of it is the personalization and so think about this is in the education side of it. So my other daughter is 15. She's doing her high school exams right now, and we're going through trigonometry. And I'm relearning trigonometry myself using ChatGPT of all things. I'm actually taking a photo of a diagram and saying, help me solve this and help me explain this to my 5 year old, or sorry, my 15-year-old, and do it in a language of grade five and it does it and I'm learning it. So think about kind of where this can go in an education field. Sophie can um, receive tailored algebra education based on her learning style, and someone else has a completely different learning style. They can receive the exact same information, but tailored to their learning style. So if he likes videos and likes the diagram, she's a very visual person. Somebody might be more auditory. So if he likes to see the big picture and then drill down, someone else might be different. We can move this into customer service. We can move this into sales and marketing, in the medical space, and so on. So a lot of that is possible. Wanted to move over here. So just we have to recognize that AI can do some things and it can't do some things, and maybe it shouldn't do some things. One of my favorite lines is at Jurassic Park when one of the visitors to the Jurassic Park says everyone was too busy figuring out if you could do something, but nobody stopped to think if you should do something. And so we take a very pragmatic look at this and say, okay, there are some things that we feel that AI should not be doing. And whenever we're recommending the communication of tools and software and where an AI agent is communicating with a human, we want to make sure that the human knows what's going on. So we tell the human, this is an AI agent. This was written by AI. This was summarized by AI. So that way everyone knows exactly where the human is and where the AI has been enabled to help with that. And so right now, as we record this in January of 25, natural language processing is one of the strongest points. image and speech recognition, as I mentioned, being able to take a photo of something and literally break it down, and then something as complicated as trigonometry, and handwritten trigonometry at that. And then the predictive analysis, that's the state that we're in right now. So I could take a bunch of data on sales and trends over the last couple of years of a business and be able to determine what forecasted sales look like just by uploading a sheet. Now, one of the things that we need to understand also is that um, there are limitations. And so the concept of true understanding, we're not there yet. So, what do we mean by true understanding? It's not able to pick up the nuance of human emotion yet. And I say yet. We'll get there, Ravinder, in a few minutes. Thanks for the question, though. So it's not able to pick up those elements. The true understanding of something, it's not there yet as well because it's not able to understand and correlate other ideas and begin to think past what it already knows based on the data that it's been trained on. And this speaks to the second point of bias and training data. So if we look at two of the current well, two of the current three models that are being used right now, two of them are basically Western generated. One of them is generated in China. Again, I'm not going to get into the geopolitics of any of this stuff right now. I just want to look at the biasing of it. One model was based on historical internet data, right? And also, we've got issues of um, copyright and all that stuff that's going into that data. But that's where that data was trained. Another set of Western data was trained differently, and it was more focused on targeting information. And then you've got a Chinese model that was also trained, but it was trained from the point of view of China. So I haven't done full testing on this, but I know I've looked at the three models. And if you look at something like Tiananmen Square, and you ask for information about it, you get three incredibly different answers based on the underlying bias of the model that's there. So we need to understand that, and we need to understand how does that play into how we use AI within our business. And then this concept of novel situations. It it's still not nuanced enough to be able to handle really small concepts and ideas, which is fine because we believe in a 10-80-10 approach to AI. 10% upfront for the human, 80% of AI and the tools do the heavy lifting, and then 10% the human comes back around it. So the novel situations and things like that, that's really where the humans kick into it. So this starts with, I think, with AI. And so really it's about establishing a mindset of what's possible with AI. So, first of all, we want to embrace curiosity. So, there are new possibilities and applications of AI popping up literally every day. Um, 1,800 new products a month are coming out that are quote unquote AI enabled. So, we just need to understand that there's change coming. We need to understand and analyze workflows and how they change from month to month. So today, right now, if I'm researching something, I'm going to go to perplexity.com, or no, perplexity.ai. I'm going to go and do research. It is basically an AI enabled Google. It is not the AI enabled platforms that are there. It is a very different experience. So if you haven't done that, we'll do that. And if you could drop into chat Perplexity, please. Then we'll take that information, we'll bring that over to, say, Notebook LM, which is a Google product, and there's free and paid versions of that. That allows me to take up to 50 different data sources and synthesize and analyze that information to then be able to go and work on. So think about RFPs, think about mass documents on projects, and be able to pull all that stuff together. And then finally, when we look at this, we want to be able to think creatively. So we want to imagine different ways how we could leverage AI to adjust our work process. Internally in the team, we're constantly saying, well, can we use AI for that? What would AI do? Can we use AI to do this? And, even in my role, I forget to do that. So it's constantly thinking, how can we apply the technology to improve what we're working on? So we want to understand that it's a tool first, okay? It's there to augment the capabilities that we have so we can be more efficient. It's there as a collaborative tool, as a thought partner in leveraging the tools for what it's capable of doing. And then ultimately it's to empower us to free up time for higher level thinking, problem solving, critical thinking, collaborative approach, and quite frankly, getting to that work-life balance because I'm not always on my heels trying to get projects done. But there still are limitations, and I want to just call your attention to this beautifully designed AI image on the left. And it looks kind of cool, but when you start looking into it, we're missing gaps of fingers. In fact, we're even missing the pinky. So it looks damn near perfect until you start looking into it. So one telltale sign of AI imagery, look at the fingers. If in the hands, if they're generally screwed up. Um, so when we look at streamlining a workflow, we can use it to identify bottlenecks, implement AI solutions to help automate repetitive tasks so we're not continuously doing those things. And then monitor and optimize. It's another great area to be able to analyze. So sales teams, customer service teams, those kind of things. How do we analyze? If you've ever heard that this call is being recorded and monitored for for training and quality assurance, everybody I've talked to says they do one out of every 100 calls per person. So that's not training and monitoring. We now can do this every call, every time in real time. So those are the kind of things that we're capable of doing now. So we start with thinking, we start with being curious about the technology, we start utilizing the technology, and now we begin to start looking at the outputs. So um is the outputs, are they accurate and reliable? So in the beginning, a lot of people will begin to start understanding how they're utilizing the tools. So we want to understand and evaluate whether the outputs are correct. The second thing is we also need to look at ethical considerations. Part of that's bias, part of that is manipulation. There is a lot of ethical considerations that are coming to the forefront. And I'll add to that also is data compliance and data privacy. Those things are part of the ongoing discussions that we're going to see through 25 and into 26. If you haven't experienced it, we're going to see AI all throughout every tool that you're using, from your cell phone to your browsers to every application on your computer. Just yesterday, Gemini by Google made a massive change. They've dropped their pricing down for their pro version from $20 to $2, and they're literally putting Gemini access to everything. And Microsoft is doing the same thing. So it's just going to be everywhere. And then when we're looking at tools, how can we begin to scale these tools? So it's great to go and write a prompt or engage with ChatGPT to do something once, but then how can we begin to replicate that and go through and make those quick? So really what we want you to look at doing is building your own strategy and educating yourself. This is part of it. We'd love to be able to help you with that. Understanding what your needs are, and then start small. You're not going to break ChatGPT. So, start with that. Create a pilot project, create a marketing thing, answer an email, ask it to say, hey, I don't know how to summarize this long email. What would you think? There's a bunch of prompt engineering stuff that we can get to, and then once you're there, then you begin to scale up. Um, so we want to look at acknowledging concerns. So there is a lot of fear and trepidation in the marketplace in terms of implementing AI. There is a lot of opportunities, and both of these have kind of their yin and their yang, if you will. I spoke to a group of 85 odd people privately. About 20 of them, 10, between 10 and 20, depending on what you consider fear, are afraid of it. And what are they afraid of? They're afraid of getting called out. They're afraid that it's cheating. They're afraid that they're going to lose their jobs. On the other side, I've got, 10 people in that same group that are just like giddy with excitement of the opportunities that present when we're able to leverage AI to help us do things. So we have to understand if we're a team lead or if we're a business owner, this is how our customers and how our team are feeling. And then finally, this is going to be a point of continuous learning. I'm not saying if you adopt AI, you have to adopt AI. And one of the mindset shifts that you're going to have is a mindset shift of continuous learning. This is going to be an ongoing process, I'm guessing for the next 10 years. Okay, so invest in yourself, invest in time, take a half hour every day and just play with ChatGPT, play with Perplexity, play with Notebook LM, and just see what's possible.